Hello everybody and welcome to another live stream. Those eagle-eyed of you will notice we're in a different setting. I'm back in my studio back in my study after the last 2 weeks where we've had kind of more mixed Wi-Fi issues. So here I have much stronger Wi-Fi, so we'll see how that goes. So thanks very much for joining. It's great that you're all here on a Sunday, of course, instead of the normal Saturday. Lots of regulars here, Lou, Hetty, Dave, Andy and Kirsty, so it's great to see you all. So as usual, a couple of quick housekeeping bits before we get going. Again, I need to perhaps work on the background a little bit more to make it a bit more exciting. The live stream is entirely driven by what you ask, what questions you raise, what things you want to talk about. So do leave comments if you're certainly watching on your desktop or computer. You'll be leaving over there. I think if you're watching this on some other device, you're probably leaving them below, but leave lots of comments. I will try and come and cover as many of those as possible in the next hour. Those of you who are perhaps new here, I'm Gary Bembridge. The channel is Tips for Travelers. The goal of the channel is to help make it more fun, make it even easier to discover, plan, and enjoy unforgettable cruise vacations. So this coming week, I will not be cruising, but I will be cruising again, pretty much on back-to-back cruises, where I have a Princess Cruise, Regal Princess, a week on Tuesday, back 2 days, and then I'll be on Virgin Scarlet Lady. So that's going to be pretty interesting, actually cruising on Scarlet Lady after only having been there before, sort of on a one-nighter when they were in Dover, all those, I guess, years ago now. So if you have any things that you want to know about Virgin or Princess, let me know about those. I'll put some posts in the community channel so you can give a chance to post those. So I can make sure that I do those. So loads and loads of comments coming on. So let's sort of jump straight into the questions. One of the things I'm looking at trying to do moving forwards is I don't always get to answer all of the questions in the live stream, particularly those that come later on. So one of the things that I may look at doing, and I might experiment with and see how that goes, is then do YouTube shorts of those questions that I haven't had a chance to post. And YouTube shorts are those new kind of vertical little clips that can be up to 60 seconds long, and so I might experiment a little bit with that. So let's get stuck straight into some of the questions that are coming in, and this is a very interesting one. So not that questions that get odd interesting, but Andy and Kirsty asking, hey Gary and all, we should of course been on Queen Elizabeth this weekend. I was actually down in Southampton on the weekend with my mother doing various bits and pieces, and we actually saw Queen Elizabeth sailing out. They'd obviously come into port anyway, even though they'd been cancelled. Anyway, are the cruise lines sailing of the UK still following any sort of passenger number limit, or has all of that changed? Now, one of the things that I've been trying to get a good finger on is exactly what's happening. Now, the cruise lines do appear to be still following a pretty cautious approach. So they were allowed to shift to a 50% capacity, so, or the 1,000 limit before. So on some sailings like Celebrity, for example, they've been sticking to the 1,000. They were upping those more to the 50%, but we haven't had any clear indication yet on whether that's increasing upwards as of yet. So certainly the lines seem to be keeping those numbers sort of within the lower amount. What they've also said is they're keeping most of the other rules in place. So that's social distancing, although some of the lines like Cunard, for example, and I think Pinot have indicated they're reducing that from the 2 meters to the 1 meter rule. They're keeping masks when you're moving around the ship inside, and booking dining and stuff. And that, I guess, is fairly reflective of what's happening on land in practice in the UK, where we're certainly seeing, even though in the UK rules have been lifted, things like mask wearing and stuff is still kind of carrying on. So the JM129 has asked a question around what advice do you have for those considering cruises other than emanating from their home country, especially with the fluidity of rules and restrictions levied by countries? The JM129, this is quite an interesting one. So I'll tell you what my advice is, and then I'll tell you what, if you decide to not agree with my advice, what to do. Certainly my advice is be extremely cautious and make sure you're going into it with very open eyes, and that you either have a really good travel agent or you're really on the ball with keeping up to date with, as you say, those rules changing, because they are constantly changing and we're seeing things moving very, very fast. And I think particularly that we're seeing accelerating with the Delta variant, which is, wreaking havoc increasingly all around the world, where we're seeing a lot of countries dialing back on rules or changing rules, whether it's passengers coming in, the amount of testing required, the sort of test requiring, quarantining, not quarantining, status of countries, etc. So make sure you've either got a really strong travel agent, as I said, or keep ahead of those. So certainly if you're heading on any of those, proceed with great caution. So personally, I'm tending not to do those. Now, lots of other people are doing those. Bob, who are normally on here, but they're actually on Viking at the moment. I know Lou has got some trips coming up, leaving kind of home countries and stuff. And I guess they're being really on the ball with the rules. So I would be extremely cautious. I would tend a little bit to lean towards those, but just make sure you're really on the ball. And I guess the most important rule of all is be ready and expect things to change, and certainly take that within your stride. And one of the things I would also recommend, which is the thing I refer to, is the work with a travel agent, because if any of these things ripple through, hopefully they will be able to manage those for you. So certainly that's one of the things that I've really been doing is kind of working with travel agents to make sure you've got all the insurance in place, because again, depending on the country, the guidance differs a little bit on what insurance you need, but those would be my really kind of critical things. I'm being pretty cautious. I've seen a couple of people that I know heading off on some cruises around the place, and they've all encountered one kind of unusual quirk or whatever of the kind. Most of it's related to do with testing and those kind of rules. Yes, so Lou's off to Alaska pretty soon. I've had quite a few people actually contact me as those Alaska things sort of, and really interested to see how they go. Certainly some of the early ones, I guess, are sailing with very low occupancy indeed. So that's, I guess, particularly especially as you head into Alaska, which will be pretty great. So for Forever Get Raw, I'd love you to dedicate a video on Celestial. I booked a cruise with them when you made me aware of the existence, also considering their 3 continents cruise. So definitely my plan, sort of linked to the thing that JM129 was saying, is I've been asked by Celestial to go and dive a little bit more into their product, because I had covered them as Forever Get Raw mentions when I was talking about some of the smaller unknown lines. So I'm definitely planning to go on. At the moment, I'm due to go to Celestial in October, depending on how things settle out and whether we can go. So I will definitely do some things on Celestial. However, if you do want to see a little bit more on Celestial, take a look at In the Loop Travel. So it's the channel's called In the Loop, and John, I think his name John Roberts, who is partnered with Colleen, who actually works at Cruise Critic, but he's just been on Celestial. So actually I've been following his vlogs, and he's done a couple of cabin tours, but he's done a series of vlogs about their very typical cruise. For those of you who don't know Celestial, it's a Greek line. They have a couple of ships. They're relatively old ships, but they've done that pretty nicely. They have a very Greek spin to everything they do in terms of food and entertainment, and they have a very classic trip which goes to the kind of the highlights of the Greek islands, your Santorini's, your Mykonos, and so on, Heraklion, all that kind of stuff. Rhodes, I think, is one of those as well. And so they're really a great place for immersing yourself in the Greek islands with the real sort of genuine Greek thing. But certainly take a look at In the Loop. John does some very nice, very nice videos indeed. So Chuck is asking a question. I have a one night to stay in Southampton between 2 Princess Cruises in June 2022. Any hotel recommendations? I do actually have a hotel recommendation. It's a little bit on the pricey side. So I'll give you kind of a pricey side and a more affordable side, depending on how extravagant you're feeling in terms of splashing out. So I actually stayed in Southampton for the first time in a very long time this weekend, because we were doing some stuff in Portsmouth with my mum. Then we stayed in Southampton. Then we got the ferry across to Isle of Wight to go and visit the Osborne House where Queen Victoria was, and to visit our namesake. The biggest village on Isle of Wight is a town called Bembridge. Anyway, so we stayed at a hotel which I've seen lots of people talking about, which is called the Southampton Harbour Hotel. Now, it's a 5-star hotel. I think it's a 5-star, if not, it's certainly a 4-star. It's in a beautiful location on a marina, and the marina is full of these beautiful yachts and things. There's some nice bars and restaurants around. It's a very beautiful location. It really is. It's a beautiful hotel, really nice rooms, but it is a little bit on the pricey side. So, it obviously varies a little bit based on how many ships are in and out and whether something's going on in Southampton. But you can be expected to pay, between 200, £250 a night. So, but it's a very beautiful hotel, and it's quite convenient for all of the various ports, but it's beautiful around there. The other place which a lot of people stay at now is the Holiday Inn, which is really close to some of the port gates. And so a couple of people stayed there. They really like the Holiday Inn. You can get some great views of the ships and things. And I know Paul and Carol, I'm not sure if Paul and Carol are in today, but they've stayed at another hotel. So if you look at the Paul and Carol love to travel. If you take a look at their site, they stayed at another hotel which I hadn't heard of before. They do a little tour there, so so that's something definitely take a look at. I see quite a few questions again coming up on insurance, so I'm going to touch on a couple of insurance questions. Again, I'll just touch on it again. I have covered it a little bit before, and again, as I said, I'm not a insurance expert, but what I've seen. So the question is, do you think the cruise line insurance is adequate? I don't normally take it, but I am during this pandemic travel, and a couple of people talking about different things. Now, personally, I tend not to take the cruise line insurance. Now, you're right. The advantage of the cruise line insurance is if they have any requirements, those should be baked in. So, for example, Royal Caribbean in the US has some requirements for people who are not vaccinated in terms of the amount that they need to have in terms of medical insurance, evacuation insurance, that kind of stuff. And these amounts differ by country. So actually, they're quite low amounts, actually, surprisingly, for those trips. So they would normally bake those into what they're doing. However, I tend to find that I can get better coverage, better is coverage the right word? Whatever the right word is for insurance, better protection, actually not going through the cruise line. So I tend not to go through the cruise lines, and I would look at independent providers personally, because often you can get much more for much less. Obviously, advantage of the cruise line, that's like to cover those things, but do watch out for what they include. It's worth having a look a little bit outside. Now, depending on where you're based, the other thing to look at, particularly if you're not based in the US, if you're say in Europe or the UK, is you can often get annual insurance, which will cover both cruises and other cruises for some often not for dramatically much more. So that's definitely worth taking a look at. Lots of discussing. So I've seen someone asking Lou about if he's going to start his own channel, and I can't see what his answer is yet. He takes videos and photos for himself. I'm sure, Lou, it would be very popular if you started doing that. But as you all know, starting a channel is an enormous amount of work. One of the things I'm thinking of doing actually is, let's see, saying one of the things I would think of making a video about is just around what it takes doing a channel, just how much work is involved, and all the other stuff that goes on. So I'd actually started a script on that, so I might actually do that. So Monica is asking, can I go for a walk on a ship training? I'm guessing you're talking about if you want to do a bit of exercise, etc. So Monica, a lot of that will depend a lot on the actual ship itself. So if you are particularly interested in, say, running, if you've got an itinerary you want to do running, or you do want to do walking, one of the things I would recommend is take a look for ships that have a full promenade deck. So not all ships nowadays do have that traditional promenade deck, which goes all the way around. And I can't remember, it depends on the ship, but you might do 3 laps and that's a mile. Other ships, particularly the bigger ships, like some of your bigger celebrity ships actually have running tracks and walking tracks. So many kind will cater for walking and running and that kind of stuff. So the answer, the short answer is yes. But again, it's really, really kind of important to take a look at that ship. So I think I'm going to just keep a little check on my iPad, because as I said on StreamYard, sometimes I think I mentioned before, it gets a little bit behind. So I just want to check that I haven't, because when I go back and look after it, I realize sometimes that's been slow in keeping up with things. I just want to check if I've missed anyone's question before I keep going on. Jim G is asking, do you know if Viking Ocean is planning on putting any solo traveler cabins on their new ships? Certainly, we've seen nothing from that at all. Certainly, Viking, their model is they have that one ship design, which they keep the same because that gives them efficiencies in building ships, and they don't have solar cabins. And certainly, I don't, from any discussions, I don't know Viking people, particularly when I know a few people there, I don't get the impression that is very high on their priority. They do a few solo traveler deals, but certainly if you take a look, say, at river cruising, where they've been for a very long time, they definitely haven't put solar cabins in at all. So let me find if I can find Lou's question to bring up around MSC, because it's an interesting one, what MSC do. Let's see if I can find that one. If not, I'll read the question that you had. So maybe I'll read your question, Lou, and I'll come back to that. So Lou was asking, any thoughts on MSC in the US just using PCR tests and masks instead of vaccinated passengers? Americans are not good for following the rules. Lou, it's been very interesting what MSC have done. Now, MSC through Europe, so right through the pandemic, when they started sailing last year in 2020, when they've started, as they've expanded even in the UK, they have very much avoided going down the vaccinated rule. They did change that, and the only country that they've changed that in was in the UK, where they started sailing without vaccination. So we're just doing, and when you talk about PCR tests, they weren't even doing PCR tests. They were actually doing not the full PCR test. They were doing the more antigen test, the quick, fast test. They did change that in the UK because the UK government said if they went with vaccinated passengers, they would be allowed to increase their capacity to 50%. So, but everywhere else, they've stuck with that. So certainly their model, and I think they view as they've sailed many sailings with the rule of testing before, sometimes during. They also often test during and at the end of cruise with their temperature checks, mask wearing, which is a big part of what they're doing. So I don't know whether they've announced the US mask, but I'm guessing probably masks. So certainly it's been very interesting. They've really followed that approach. Personally, I found that kind of an interesting approach, but what they seem to be sticking with. I've tended not to go on MSC. I'm not a massive fan of MSC particularly, but I've also not really been on them since the pandemic because I feel that seems quite a big risk personally. So Lisa L, do you ever come over to the US and go on Caribbean Alaskan cruises? Your country's been so helpful and educational. Lisa, I do a lot of those. In fact, when I look at most of my cruises, I do actually surprisingly few cruises out of the UK. I'm doing them now because that's my only option at the moment, because international cruising is still not allowed for UK residents. You don't have insurance cover. Some people are doing it, and there's ways of getting around it. But yes, is the answer to your question. I've done much more. So if you look at my schedule into next year, I'm doing a lot of cruising out of the US, both going to Alaska and a couple of Caribbeans. If you ever want to know what cruises I'm on, by the way, on my website, tipsfortravelers.com, I actually have a thing that's called Cruise With Me. I probably need to call it something better. But I list all the cruises that I've got coming up. So if people ever wanted to know where I am or come on the same cruise as me, that's where you can find. That's where you can find where I am. Jeffrey Fortin is saying, I saw your video on Viking. Thanks very much for watching that. It's been quite popular so far. Do they tend to stick to the same general schedule for cruises year over year? I'd like to take the Bermuda cruise in a few years. Jeffrey, that's an interesting one because Viking do tend to have historically a couple of successful, I guess, cruises that they tend to do quite a lot and do every year because they are quite popular, but they do constantly add new itineraries on. Of course, as they keep adding more ships, that's given them more flexibility. But you'll find, for example, if you want to do around the, things like around the UK, if you want to do the Baltics, if you want to do the fjords, if you want to do certain parts of the Mediterranean, if you want to do Alaska, they tend to have those cruises which they know work quite well. It's going to be very interesting to know whether they keep that Bermuda cruise, to your point, because that was one they brought on because it was something they could do. So that's going to be very interesting to see how that does. So, for example, equivalent to the Bermuda cruises, they brought on the cruise out of Malta, where they're sailing. I suspect they will not keep the Malta cruise because it's much easier to focus on big hub countries. So I suspect you'll find, yes, they do many of the similar cruises. A lot of them rely on big hub country, places like Barcelona, ports in Florida, Seattle, Vancouver, Southampton, or actually they use London for that. So I would be surprised if we could keep the Bermuda one, but it's a very interesting itinerary. Of course, if you want to follow the Bermuda one, Bob and Holly of Innocents Abroad, they are currently on that, and I know they've committed to making a whole kind of series around that. So so that's going to be if you want to find out about the Bermuda cruise, I'm saying they've been posting lots of stuff, and it's been really, really interesting. So Stephen asking me, have you considered an Atlantis cruise? So those of you who don't know Atlantis cruise, Atlantis is it's a charter company. They charter ships. They run LGBT, effectively mostly gay men, I think, cruises that they run for. These are generally big party cruises. So Stephen, I suspect I'm probably about 30 or 40 years too old for those cruises. So no is the answer to your question. They are extremely popular. And if you ever want to know just how big a party they are, if you can search Atlantis cruises on YouTube, they are mostly big party cruises. And so that's probably, I probably past that. They'll probably get going as I'm kind of heading to bed. So but Atlantis, it's a very interesting operation. They've got one of the ones they're doing quite soon is Virgin Scarlet Lady, which, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going on 2 weeks, 3 weeks time, whatever, that are doing the UK sailings. Atlantis have actually chartered Scarlet Lady for one of those around the UK cruises. So it's going to be very interesting to see quite what sort of cruise it's going to be, because they're not going to have the normal big pool, I guess, of parties. So that is going to be just see whether it's a slightly different thing. And charter cruises are kind of very interesting because they are a big part of what's happening in cruising. You'll often find if you look at a cruise itinerary on most of the big lines, if you ever see a gap, if you look at the calendar, you'll increasingly see kind of gaps in schedules, and that means one of two things. One, they're going for their kind of regular that they tend to have to do under maritime sort of rules or regulations. They have some commitments every couple of years to go in for dry dock, but a lot of those are charters. Some are big party cruises, some are more themed or whatever. So Stephen asking if anyone's been on Atlantis cruise. So everyone has been, but if you want to find out more, Stephen, if you do Google, there's a guy called Joey T, who's been on quite a few Atlantis cruises. He has some really good vlogs on YouTube. So if you search for Joey T or you search for Joey T Atlantis cruise, you'll find quite a lot of those, and he does a pretty good coverage on those. Craig O. Hi Gary, Denver, Colorado here. Very nice. Thoughts on Norwegian fjords cruise. It's a bit of a tongue twister, about whether to do the shorter cruise or go up to the northern part of Norway. Craig, I would say in terms of the Norwegian fjords is absolutely one of my favorite kind of cruises that I've done. I went originally as a bit of a skeptic on Norwegian fjords cruise. I thought it was going to be a bit dull, but it was really pretty magnificent. The scenery is phenomenal. It's very different, say, to go on an Alaska cruise, but it is that kind of breathtaking sight. Now, what I would suggest, though, is, because I think it's a good point around, do you do the more simple one, which simple is probably the wrong word, the more traditional one, which you can do very easily, which is normally a 7-nighter, say, out of Southampton or Amsterdam or wherever, which will go to like Geiranger Fjord, Stjørnar Fjord, Kollensvanger or Bergen, those kind of places. So stay a little bit more to the south, or do the ones that go much further up to Tromsø and into the Arctic Circle. Now, what I would say, Craig, is I would certainly strongly consider the one which goes further up, particularly if you're timing it around the Northern Lights. So, for example, I'm trying to remember the Northern Lights. I think there's some a little bit later this year, but there's also some around March, April time. And what some cruise lines say, like Hurtigruten, are promising, they're doing things where they guarantee if you don't see the Northern Lights, they'll give you a cruise again to do it. But I would strongly recommend going up there. I mean, that whole area up Tromsø area is very beautiful. You also get the cachet, particularly if you go up. I've forgotten the name. That's just north of Tromsø. It's a Kirkenes. Oh, I'm getting confused. Kirkenes. Anyway, which you then get the advantage of going through up past the Arctic Circle, so you get that little tick and that certificate. but seeing the Northern Lights is quite magnificent. I've actually, to be honest with you, I've seen the Northern Lights, but I've actually seen it on land from Finland, not on a cruise, because most of the cruises I've done have been the other ones, and I've got through the whole series of those being cancelled. So I actually have arranged next year to do 2 Norwegian fjords cruises, which get me right up there to make sure. One of them gets me right up there to make sure that I actually see them from a ship as well. So yes, so Jenny making the point about the harbour hotel, and you're right. Right on the top, there's a magnificent bar area, which is actually where we had dinner as well, where we could see the ships coming in and out, and you get some very nice views indeed. We saw Iona, we saw Sky Princess, Regal Princess, Queen Elizabeth, and Celebrity Silhouette all coming in and out in the time that we were there. John is asking a question. John, I don't know the full answer to this, but it's a very good point for people who need extra oxygen or under their oxygen. Is a couple of the cruise lines have banned people who need those coming on board, partly because of some of the requirements, as I understand it, around extra storage of oxygen related to some of the COVID protocols. So Cunard have done it, P&O have done it, some of the UK lines have done it. So I think you're right, if you are definitely going on a cruise, check very carefully. I haven't seen, but it doesn't mean they haven't done it, I haven't seen non-Carnival ships doing it. I have seen there's some tightening up on lines by things like Royal Caribbean and Celebrity of some of the things, equipment they will take and won't take. So it's a really, really good point, is particularly if you need any special equipment, if it was available for pre-COVID, as we head sort of post, I know people tell me off for saying we're post-COVID because we're not post-COVID, but post-shutdown, then some of those rules have changed. So really, really important. Again, the advantage is working with the travel agent. Phil answering the question. Love the channel, which is always great. It's always nice to get that little plug. Phil asking the question: got a Britannia cruise at the end of August and a concern with the recent reports of long dining queues. What was your recent experience like? Now, certainly, Phil, my experience, I had no problem at all with dining queues. Now, what they've done on P&O, which a lot of other ships have done, the P&O app is actually, to be honest, doesn't work as well because it's not a proper app. But basically what you can do at the moment is for the specialty dining, you can book a time on that app, but you can only do the app once you're on board. It's really a web page based app. You can book like lunch and stuff, but for some bizarre reason, you can't book dinner. You have to join a virtual queue. Now, certainly, I had no issues at all with it. I would literally, before I left my cabin, I would say, right, I'm going to go for dinner at whatever, Peninsula, whatever. I put it in, say, I'm coming, I want a thing. Almost before I left the cabin, I got a little ping saying that it's ready. I think the problem maybe is that people haven't quite got a handle on the app itself. So, for example, the afternoon teas, because of the restrictions, which are being a little bit released, and it was all sea days, they were always full. But what people were not quite figuring out is you could actually book your afternoon tea the day before. So I would book it the day before if I was going. Other people would book it the day before on the day. But then there would be a massive queue of people hoping to get into afternoon tea. And again, I saw a little bit with dinner. So that could be the issue. Certainly, I didn't have any issues. I will check in also with Amber, cruising with Amber, who's just got off Britannia yesterday or so. But certainly, I haven't seen issues. But I've seen lots of people struggling with the app. Certainly, you'll be interested, Phil, once you've been on Britannia, what you think of Britannia. Now, I had very mixed views about P&O, and I'd really be interested to see. It's still kind of early in the process where they've got the service and stuff a little bit slicker, which maybe with some of the issues that I've had, their service was not quite on the ball yet, so that could have been one of the issues. Certainly, I didn't have any issues. KB in the UK, bamboozled by insurance and the massive difference in pricing from where it's the same coverage. Can't buy holiday extras online due to repricing. Any thoughts? KB in the UK, it is a little bit complicated. So you're right. Holiday extras, I think they pulled their stuff still. If it should be due back, I guess, in a week or so. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Two things to perhaps have a look at. I bought my insurance from Stay Shore, and I think they're pretty good. But the other thing is I also tend to look at, because I need previous conditions insurance, so it's harder for me in terms of searching. But certainly, if you take a look at something like Money supermarket, they have quite a good search comparison, insurance comparison engine. So that could be a quite good way of doing that, because sometimes it's a little bit easier to then compare the different policies and et cetera, what they're doing. Hopefully that helps. Jeffrey, for my Princess cruise this December, I'm booking directly with Princess. Are there advantages or disadvantages to doing this? I was unhappy with my old travel agent and didn't know any others. So I'm going to take a slug of this. So, Jeffrey, so I can't remember, did you mention where you were going to? Now, I used to book directly myself, and I've shifted now to using an agent, but I think you're right. Absolutely critical is finding a really good travel agent, someone that is on the ball, that you can trust, that you can rely on, and finding those is challenged. And I found someone in the UK that I use, Sarah Bolton, I've spoken about before, and there's a guy in the US, Gary Pluck, that follows the channel, may even be on here, often joins the live streams, who I sort of got to know more online. I know a couple of people who've used him, and certainly people in the US that have used him have been very happy with him. So, finding an agent is a challenge. I think one of the things I would also say about agents when I'm talking is it's about a person. So a lot of people, certainly during the pandemic time, the peak of the pandemic time, that were working with purely digital travel agents got very frustrated around that. So I think it's also about having a person that you can engage and talk with. So in terms of the advantages, the disadvantage, let me talk about the disadvantages, if there are any. I mean, the price that you get booking direct with the cruise lines, unlike, say, hotels, will be the same as you get with an agent. So you find at the moment, in pretty much all cases, you're going to get the same price. Sometimes the agent may even be slightly cheaper because they might give you extra onboard credit or throw other things or actually cut into their commission stuff. So there is no price advantage as such. So they don't give you any advantage. It's not really known whether there's any advantage booking direct when it comes to things like upgrades, etc. In my experience of what I can observe, really, it seems to be much more related to status on cruise ships than status within the line than anything else related to direct. So I'm not sure there's any big disadvantages. There's more, I see it as advantages going through a good travel agent. So if you hit a problem and the agent has bundled everything together for you, so your flights, the hotel before, transfers, or whatever, and they've done it as a bundle, you just have one point of contact that can then sort all of that out. Now, if you're booking because you're just driving to the port and all you literally need is the cruise only piece, or you're booking some of the the package with flights and stuff, I guess you've got one point of contact. So I see most of the advantages. I see it's more that there's not so much a disadvantage of booking. I don't explain this very well. Disadvantage of booking with the cruise line, because you're going to get, you're going to get the cruise. You're going to have someone, whether you do it online or talk to them, you're going to have someone that can sort it out for you and help you choose a cabin and stuff. The advantage of going with the travel agents, they're a little bit more independent, so they can work you a little bit around, helping you choose your cabin. They'll spend the time helping you choose your cabin, making sure you're on the right ship. If you're dealing directly with the cruise line, they're less likely to do that because it's much more of a sales operation than anything else. So I've shifted very much mindset towards travel agents. I don't know if that's answered. If not, then let me know if there's anything more specifically that I haven't answered that I can answer to. So let's have a look in terms, because I can see again, Janet's asking a question. This is a good one on drinks packages. I've actually just there's a video being edited where I talk a little bit more about drinks packages, because I've had more and more questions about drinks packages, particularly, I guess, now that people are back cruising again and are starting to look at buying things like cruise drinks packages and stuff again. People are asking more questions. So in a video I've got coming up recently, I delve into a little bit more into drinks packages. So that video probably though won't be out till next week. The week after, not this coming week, the week after that, it will come out. So I have much more information coming, Janet. But basically, is there a cap on drinks you get with a drinks package? Anyone know? 10 seems to ring the bell. The answer is it varies a little bit based on the cruise line that you're on. So some cruise lines will have all sorts of rules around it, but many of them will cap it. So some it could be 10, some it could be 9, some it could be much more, some it's more related. Also, there's a price linked to it. So you might be able to have, say, your 9 drinks, but they can't be more than $8 each. those kind of things. So every cruise line has a slightly different rules. So that's that's definitely one to watch. But you're right. As a general rule, assume that there's normally a cap on those. And it's very important to understand what the cap is. So is the cap on any kind of drink, or is the cap on alcoholic drinks, or things like especially coffees if they're included, or sodas that are not included, for example. And the other big watch I'd always say to people with drinks packages particularly is make sure that it's going to be good value. And secondly, check if everyone in your cabin has to have it or not, because that sometimes can be quite expensive way. Now, one of the things that I have in the video that's coming up as a sort of a prequel is I found two really good drinks calculators on sites, one on Cruisely and one on Cruise Mom, where you can actually go in and you can pick your cruise line. In the video, I talk about both of those because they don't, between the two of them, they then cover most of the big cruise lines, including some of the UK cruise lines, as well as the more familiar US cruise lines. And what they've done there is you can input what you think you would normally drink on a typical day. They'll tell you what you average out with in terms of what that's going to cost you on that line you've chosen. And then it will tell you what, if that makes sense in terms of the different drinks packages. So that's quite a nice way of also kind of working out. So that's definitely something to do. LJ Joe, is there an Apple website like Seat Guru, but for cruise cabins? There is not. And it was one of the things I kept thinking, this to me feels like an opportunity, and maybe I should have thought about that or whatever, but maybe Seat Guru will come to it. But interesting enough, there is not, surprisingly. There is not a similar site to Seat Guru, and it's actually surprisingly difficult to find out. The closest you can sometimes find out is on Cruise Critic. When people do their reviews, they are increasingly asking them to put their cabin number in and a short 1 or 2 sentence on the cabin. But again, it's a more problematic one to search. But there's certainly, I guess you do, when I go on flights, if it's a new airline configuration or new airline, I absolutely use Seat, absolutely use Seat Guru. But no, there's not. So maybe someone will come on and crack that, because I think that would be a great opportunity. So I was just saying thank you. Last time 50. How long does it take to transfer from Miami to Fort Lauderdale? Now, there's an interesting thing that you might want to consider if you are going between the two. Is there is a rail service called Brightline. It was going to be renamed. Virgin was doing a sort of deal, and that all unraveled. But Brightline have a service that runs also between Miami and Fort Lauderdale. Between, I think I'm right in saying it's about half an hour or 40 minutes or so in between the two. I normally allow at least an hour or so, depending on how you're going, because traffic between that two can be pretty bad. But I normally allow an hour or a little bit more longer than an hour if I'm getting an Uber or a taxi or whatever. But increasingly looking at that Brightline, it's a very great service, and they have some nice links with Uber and stuff as well. And I think good point, Theo, making the point is on YouTube, we'll post a video with a specific cabin number. I do that quite a lot. You're right. If I'm going on a new ship, I will go on YouTube and I'll put, Britannia Suite B528 or whatever. So that's actually quite a good tip. And Butterfly McKean saying cruisestateroom.com. I must check that one out. I'm not familiar with that. So that will be an interesting, that will definitely be an interesting one to check. So let me just do Jeffrey making the point, it depends. Whoops, I missed you. Jumped up there. Making the point again, time difference. I mean, I have been on that stretch between Miami and Fort Lauderdale, and the traffic grinds to a halt, and it can be pretty slow, I guess is the best way to do. Mike saying, if you don't drink alcohol, cruise lines offer a much cheaper soda package covering soft drinks. That's a very good point. So I think I mentioned before, because I don't drink alcohol, but I tend to only get drinks packages when they're linked to, if there's some sort of deal, what I've got. But you're right. Do look at those deals. Particularly, I like more like specialty coffees and stuff. So often, like on Princess and stuff, I'll buy they have a card. I think it's 25 or whatever you do. Cookkiness, I think that's right. I think that is Cookkiness. I think you're right. That's the one that's right up past Tromsø. And as I mentioned, those I'll maybe try and link it in the notes here. As I said, it is coming on the video, which were those little calculators it's on cruiserly.com and cruisemummy.co.uk. So Jen, if you can't wait, then definitely take a look at those. Sort of Google beverage drinks package calculator, and they should come up for you. They've done a lot of work on those, and they are pretty good. So let's have a look and see how we are doing on the question side. So Jeffrey left a super chat thing. Thank you very, very much indeed for that. Simon saying, just got back today from my first Pinot Britannia, enjoyable, but looking forward to Celebrity Beyond next year, our third Celebrity cruise. Celebrity Beyond, I'm very envious of going Celebrity Beyond. That is their next after they had Edge, Apex, and now Beyond is kind of their next almost generation. It's kind of seems like a supercharged Edge class. It looks fantastic. It's actually sailing out of the UK, I think, in April next year when it comes out of the shipyard. And I would really, really like to have done that, but with all my cruises next year, it didn't really pan out. So, but I'm very envious of Beyond, so that'll be great to do. David R from, oops, why did that not come up? Yeah, Celebrity Beyond looks amazing. So they're from the Cruise Show UK. Do Holland America ever home port from the UK? They don't, and they don't have any plans to. It's something that I keep asking. As people probably know, I like Holland America. I've always had a great time on Holland America. I know it's not for everybody, but I really like Holland America. But they have not home port from the UK, and it's been very infrequent that they actually even sort of sail to the UK, around the UK or whatever. They don't know. And I did speak to them before about that and hoped that they do it, but they don't seem to have any plans to do that. And I guess, you know, as being part of the Carnival Corporation, you know, they've obviously got Cunard and Pinot, which sail a lot. Princess, you know, bases a lot of ships increasingly out of the UK. So I guess that they feel that's kind of covered. And I guess they have that strong link, you know, because obviously they're Dutch. They sell a lot out of Amsterdam. So, for example, next time doing a Baltics cruise with them, 10 or 11 nighter, and that's out of Amsterdam. So they do quite a lot of sailing out of Amsterdam. They also do quite a lot, I think, out of Copenhagen, if I remember correctly, as well. Right, they're saying just watch out on YouTube. It's often disgruntled passengers. I think it's a bit like that on Cruise Critic, where it's a bit like TripAdvisor became. You kind of get the ranters and the ravers, so you're kind of getting that balance is sometimes quite interesting indeed. Jenny's asking an interesting question, because the answer is, are cruises actively encouraging passengers to use room service more during the pandemic? And it was actually very interesting, Jenny, because certainly in all of the initial, when all the protocols came out for the return to cruise, there was a lot of talk about encouraging more use of room service and enhanced room service menus. And it was particularly when they were concerned about having to have more social distancing, perhaps fewer numbers in the main dining rooms and managing numbers. And coming back a bit to the point that was being asked earlier about Pinot Britannia and queues for dining. So there certainly was a lot of talk about that. Now, certainly the ones that I've been on, I haven't seen any real push in terms of room service. They do make the point that room service is available. And in some of the ships, they make the point, although it's maybe more grade driven, is they've got slightly more enhanced room service menus, perhaps slightly bigger room service menus than before. So, before room service would sort of be more club sandwiches and Caesar salads and burgers and stuff, slightly wider. Something in the grade, ability to order, which you can probably do anytime anyway, from the main dining room menu. But no, I haven't seen it at all. And some of the cruise lines did, I'm trying to remember who now, but some of the cruise lines that talk about not charging, and some of the introduced charges, rooms that spoke about alleviating them, but it hasn't been as big a push as I'd expected. Maybe they found, certainly because with the lower capacity they've got at the moment, it's been easier to manage numbers than they thought. But certainly, definitely has not been as big as you definitely had expected. Cruising Bird asking the question: do you know if any cruise lines plan to sail from Harwich? I always pronounce it badly, don't I? Royal Caribbean did a few years ago with Jewels of the Sea. Joy, I haven't seen it now. The last I did see, and I don't know offhand, is that Fred Olsen also used to do a couple of cruises from a couple of places like that, but I certainly haven't seen any of the lines pushing that. And that may be because they, at the moment, they're so focused on coming back into service, and they've been focusing on Southampton, more and more ports, because Portsmouth have been pushing to get a lot of cruise ships, and they've, through post-pandemic, are starting to get more, and Dover and Liverpool have been pushing in that, and I guess Newcastle increasing pushes. So I haven't seen many. Take a look at Fred Olsen, but certainly I haven't seen any of the Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, those lines mentioning it at all. Jeffrey asking the question, what lines have adult-only sun decks? Royal Caribbean used to, but not the last job I was on. Nice to have a peaceful area to sunbathe. Jeffrey, what a lot of the cruise lines have done, particularly the more premium ones, so is using it increasingly, though, which maybe not what you're looking for, is a revenue-generating opportunity. So you'll find a lot of the cruise lines, particularly your things like Princess, Holland America, Celebrity, and then your Seabourns and things like that. They've introduced like things like the retreat, for example, where you pay to go and have a sort of a more quiet adult space. You get a little cabana or whatever. So there, so a lot of lines do have them, but they're more paid for opportunities. Now there are a couple of lines. So Norwegian used to have, was it called H2O? Is it called H2O? I think it's called H2O. So a lot of the Norwegian ships will have still the adult areas at the back of the ship, for example. And what a lot of the cruise lines do, although it's not always well enforced, and again, it's still things like Holland America, P&O do it, various other lines do it, is where they will say that the pool that is at the rear of the ship normally is for adults only, and the pool that's in the center of the ship is more for families. So they will do that. Is another way of doing it. Now, is it always strictly enforced? Not always, but that's the other thing that they do. So there is, many ships will have that opportunity, but then what you do have, though, Jeffrey, if you want to go the full hog, is if you go on some of the German lines, for example, like AIDA, they actually also have a adult-only nudist sunbathing area. So you could go the full hog and really get stuck in, if you like. Stuck in, and that's probably a terrible thing to do. And then I think the point the Butterfly McQueen is making is you've also, of course, could go the other element, if you're not just looking for those, is you've then got things like Norwegian has the Haven class, although in the Haven class it's not adults only, I think I'm right in saying so, but it tends to be much more adult only kind of things. Interesting, people talking about more discussion there about room service. I must admit, I'm a little bit like enjoying life one port at a time, which is I'm a little bit like tend to do more room service in the morning and less so in the evening, particularly on shorter cruises. It's also, I always find if you're doing evening room service, you have that sort of bit of a dance with your cabin steward, sort of wanting to do your cabin, and you sort of feel you kind of sort of need to get out. Thank you, Norwegian Cruise Line. It's Vibe, not H2O. I don't think it was H2O. And then someone else was talking about Royal Caribbean have I've lost it now. Anyway, it was there somewhere. The other bit. Lisa asking a question, do you like to go on inaugural cruises? I'll be going on Carnival's Mardi Gras from Port Canaveral in January 2022 once the kinks have been worked out. Let me take a sip of this and I will answer that question. Now, there's 2 points to this, two parts to this question. Do I like to go on them, and do I recommend people go on them? Because they're actually slightly different. I like to go on inaugural cruises or early cruises because obviously it gives me a chance to get to experience the ship early on, maybe do some videos about the ship and report about the ship on the channel. So I do it almost like with a, not a professional hat, but like a sort of with my sort of content creation hat on. So I like to go on those for that reason. What I do say, caution people though, is if you're going, it's your once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year, whatever it is, vacation, perhaps proceed with more caution, because there is a chance that things will not run as smoothly as you want, either because everything hasn't been finished on a ship. So certainly when I've been on those cruises, you'll normally find this workman on board. And in some cases I've been where they've actually ended up canceling passengers because they've had to have some workman on board to finish stuff. So everything's not open because they're still kind of doing mad fitting and finishings, putting carpets in or live fittings or whatever. Things may not work because once they've got all passengers on, even though they've done a shakedown cruise where some trade or travel agents or members of the company, they until everyone's on their full, they don't always get those out. So you have to bear in mind, if you go on a one of those kind of very early cruises, there is a chance that you won't have the full wonderful experience. So it's more a watch out. I have to encourage people perhaps just wait a little bit later unless you really want to have that. I've been on the maiden voyage, the inaugural cruise of every single ship. Now, interesting point, because you put inaugural in inverted commas, and you could be making a really good point here, which is the other thing that cruise lines do, particularly from a marketing perspective, is they'll often inaugural cruises. Now, I once was going to make a video about this, but it got so complicated, I didn't do it. Maybe I should do it. You've got the maiden voyage and you have these inaugural voyages. So what cruise lines sometimes do is the maiden voyage should be the very first voyage that goes out kind of with paying passengers. So that's the first time the ship really truly sets sail. Now, they might have had other people on board, shakedown cruises. But you can have an inaugural voyage in, the inaugural voyage of Mardi Gras in Europe, because it's the first time they've sailed in Europe. So there is a bit of marketing around it. So I'm talking more about ships absolutely going in. So it could be that you're referring said much more to, they've done some of their maiden stuff, shaken it out, and they did their inaugural there, which could be. But certainly that's what I would, that's what I would recommend. Just people sort of think around that very, very carefully. So Carl is asking, do you have any recommendations as to what type of camera to take on a cruise? So Carl, it a little bit depends on what you're planning to do. One of the simplest and easiest cameras to take, of course, is just your mobile phone. And that is the simplest and easiest to take. You can take 4K video with it. You can take obviously very high quality photographs with it. And most of them have pretty good storage, and you can do time lapses with them. You can do slow motion with them. So certainly, in many cases, depending on what you want to do with it, I would almost stick to that. It's small, it's portable, it's easy, and whatever. So that's probably the simplest answer. If you're looking, and in fact, even if you're looking to do a YouTube channel, or you're looking to do some Zooty video, which you want to show your friends and family, you're still going to get 4K video from your your video from theirs, and you can then edit, and it's all fantastic. If you want to do, and you can also buy little gimbals and things. So a lot of people who have YouTube channels use only a mobile phone. They might buy a little gimbal because it stabilizes stuff, so there's not a lot of extra expense. So you might argue, actually, don't buy a camera if you want to just get a little bit more stability, but actually just buy a little gimbal and then use the gimbal and use your phone. So that's one thing to think about as an example. And certainly, even when I go, I take too many cameras and things, and I will often do a lot of stuff on my phone because it's also a little bit discreet if you're looking at doing stuff. I also, if you want something small and discreet and easy to use because you want nimble and you want to do video, take a look at the Osmo Pocket. I know David with Cruise Show UK uses that. It's a tiny thing. It's it's hard. I haven't got my one handy, but it's only still about as big as that. It's a built-in gimbal. It takes, again, 4K. It does time lapses. It does motion things. It takes photographs. There's a new version out called Pocket 2. You can connect Wi-Fi. The new version, Pocket 2, you can now even connect a microphone to it. But it's very small, discreet. You can put it in your pocket. So that's the sort of things I would do. Well, I'll tell you what I also take. I also take the Sony A6400, which is about that big, which gets more complicated. So, Carl, I probably over-answered your question, but that would be that would be my initial thoughts. So hopefully that helps. Someone's asking, so summarize the marketing. Yes, maybe you're just asking. Marketing, I don't think cruise industry, but perhaps yes. So I was in marketing. You're absolutely correct. I worked for Johnson & Johnson for 20-something years. I worked for Unilever before that, but I was with Johnson & Johnson for 25-something years. like that. And I used to work on baby products. I used to look after the global marketing for Johnson Baby, which most of you probably know. And then more later on, I worked for Neutrogena, which is part of Johnson & Johnson. And then I also worked on Rock, which is anti-aging skincare. Yeah, Crusoe saying DJI Pocket 2. So, and Lude saying iPhone works great. Certainly when I go away on kind of non-trips where I'm non-YouTubing, if you like, I basically take my phone. I used to take other things, but I literally take my phone. If you want to know more, Janet saying Google me, that's always the great thing. But if you want to know much more detail about me, also LinkedIn, if you look to Gary Benford on LinkedIn, you'll find much more. I should probably do a much more better thing about myself on my website. I've got on my to-do list to update my actual website with stuff, so a little bit more. Still use Johnson's Baby Lotion, fantastic, good to hear. It was a great brand to work on. Irish in the USA, good to see you here. Aside from Cunard Line, do you have any recommendations for transatlantic crossings? We're looking at Aruba crossing via the southern route. Well, I guess obviously you're going to have to find something that includes Aruba on that. So I would say Irish in the USA, if you're looking for a crossing, obviously if you want to do a crossing on anything other than Cunard, you're going to have to do it either March, sort of April time, or kind of September, October time when people are repositioning ships. No one else runs the regular transatlantics, but I'm guessing that you know that. So what I would then say is what you should then really focus on is think around, what do you want to do on the transatlantic crossing? So do you want something that is going to have a shed load of entertainment and a shed loads of things to do? Because obviously you're going to have a lot of sea days. Now, most of those ones which go from Europe to the Caribbean or the other way around, they can be up to 10 days, 2 weeks long. And you have at least 6 to 7 sea days, almost often consecutively. You might stop at the Azores or something like that on the way. So think a lot around what you're going to want to do on your sea days, because some cruise lines obviously will have much more to do because they're just bigger ships. And, we'll just have so much more entertainment. So I think it's really around like, what are you going to be most comfortable? What ship are you going to, cruise line and ship are you going to be most comfortable spending a long cruise days on, long sea days on? So, if you want to be really, make sure you're going to be entertained, I would tend to lean towards the more mid-sized and bigger ships, whether it's your Celebrities, Holland America, Princess, those kinds of things. Or of course you can then go up to the big resort ships if that's what you're really looking forward to, all that stuff. If you start going on the smaller ships, the Viking, Oceania, Azamara and stuff, you will have kind of a daily program, but it's not going to be as full on. There will be enrichment and there'll be various activities and stuff, but it's going to be much more of your own time doing your own thing. So that's what I would say. I've only really crossed the Atlantic on Cunard mostly. I've done it on P&O before. If I was doing a Cunard one, so I was looking to go to the Caribbean, I would probably look at some of the Viking, because I think it's a nice ship. I'd like to be on the ship. I like the deck areas. I think I know that entertainment wouldn't be full on, but I would do that. Look at that. But I would still tend to. So I would look at that in one area. So there's Oceanias, but I would probably end up finding that I would lean more towards like a ship that of the size of, say, Queen Elizabeth, Queen Victoria. So you're talking about, the Holland America, New Statendam, New Amsterdam kind of size, or Celebrity, some of the Solstice class, because you're going to have bigger production shows that are more likely to bring on more guest entertainers. They will have a casino, those kind of things. So hopefully I hope that's answered your question. I've actually been toying again with actually doing one of those repositioning cruises, because you can get some phenomenal deals on a repositioning, and as you say, you can then have some great time in the Caribbean at the end. The Lone Cruise, I apologize, I saw this earlier and I haven't answered it. Has anyone got any information or experiences with Star Clippers? I couldn't find much online. I know it was you or someone else that asked me around Star Clippers, and you're right, there's not a lot, and certainly even on YouTube, there's not a lot with Star Clippers. The only person that I know that's done Star Clippers is Janine Williamson, who's a journalist, and she's done some articles on Star Clippers. So, but I think she did it for World of Cruising. So if you actually perhaps Google Star Clippers, maybe Janine Williamson, Star Clipper Janine Williamson. Hopefully the articles that she's done will come up. If not, you could also look for her on Facebook and maybe drop her a note as well. She's a big fan of Star Clippers. In fact, she was encouraging me to do some Star Clipper stuff, and with the pandemic, that's all got lost. So that's the best thing, unfortunately, I've got. If anyone else has got anything on that, that would be helpful. And I'm guessing nobody else has has done that. So I'm having a look. Jeff is looking at doing Whole America to Aruba, which is a great idea. Celebrity, as I said, etc., etc., etc. Right, well, so hopefully I've answered most of the questions. I will go back, as I said, and take a look and see if I have missed anybody through that whole process. Thanks for the thumbs up, etc. So thanks for joining me. Next week, I will be back on a Saturday. We will do the Saturday live stream again at the usual kind of time. And again, hopefully I'll be able to do the Saturday afterwards in between my Princess Cruise and my Virgin Cruise. So next Saturday, I will be here. I will go through and try and answer any of the questions. As I said, try it out with the YouTube Shorts. Thanks so much for everybody being here. It's been fantastic, and I really appreciate it. So I hope you have a great rest of the week. I have a video coming out this evening. If you haven't watched the one I did about cruising on an over 50 line, that's something you might want to do. It seems very popular and people are enjoying it. So have a great rest of your weekend, and thanks for joining.